Well, Dr. Berger, thank you so much for joining me again today.
Well, you are welcome. It's always wonderful to spend time with you. I had so much fun last time we got together.
Do you know everybody loved your episode? I got so much positive feedback and from other professionals too. I'll be interviewing another gal. She's a clinical director and a LMFT. And she was like, oh, I'm so glad you guys talked about trauma and how to, the sequence of events, solve the addiction problem first before diving deep into trauma tools. That made so much sense to me.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true. We can, look, and none of these things are hard and fast rules. Sometimes the trauma is so great, you still have to address it at the beginning. So, one of the things I've tried to move away from, Helena, is this idea that we have to do something one way. I was so much more rigid earlier on in my career, and today I realize there are so many roads to Rome, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many ways to do it. And look, the bottom line is, let's figure out what this individual needs to find their way in recovery. That's the goal here. It's not to promote a certain kind of idea or method or anything like that. It's to meet this individual where they're at and help them discover what's going to be best for them. And that's what the journey that we're all on. See, that's one of the things I found in my own personal experience in the rooms, right? Is that program was big enough for me to find my way in it. Right? And my program is not what anybody else's program is. It may not work for someone else. It works for me. And that's the beauty of it. I found my path. And I think that that's what hopefully you and I can do today, is help some people find their path.
Amen. I really want people to find their own path. And I sort of stand on this belief that the answers are within us. And you're right. I want to talk about sort of the pros and cons of rigidity too. I think the main topic of our discussion will be your book, The 12 Stupid Things People Do to Mess Up Their Recovery or Sobriety. I'm not looking at the title right now, but we'll go over the 12 things, because relapse is such it can be so devastating for people who experience it, but it can also be such a great learning experience. There's just pros and cons to everything. And like when you were talking about rigidity, that's one of the common complaints I hear about the 12-step program, is that it's too rigid. People are, the sponsors are too controlling and on and on. But I found comfort in discipline. I found comfort with boundaries. And, Jocko Willink is this, he's an author and a Navy SEAL, and he talks about discipline as freedom. So do you have thoughts about the pros and cons of rigidity?
No, I agree with you. And see, and maybe what we could even think about, maybe it's best to not think of discipline as rigidity. See, we might be fusing that concept together.
Yeah.
See, discipline to me is where you're holding yourself accountable to something in your life that's important and that's going to be of value to you, right? So if I'm disciplined, I am staying focused on that and integrating that into my life. For me, rigidity becomes a thing of not being disciplined, but having to deal with what I call the tyranny of the shoulds. Ooh. See, it becomes something that's not of us. We're trying to live up to somebody else's expectation and idea of who we should be. And a lot of us, look, I still have some of those inside me. You still have some of those inside me. Those are installed very early into our psyche, early in our life, very early in our life. And to the degree that those are still operating, those kinds of things end up running my life instead of my spiritual self, instead of my best self, right? Those are the things that'll take me down a different path, right? And so I think it's important we make that distinction, because I believe in discipline. I think, even Scott Peck in his book, The Road Less Traveled, he said, oh
my gosh, yeah.
Wonderful book, right? An incredible. Favorite. One of the things he said is mental health is discipline. Mental health, you have to have a certain degree of discipline in your life. So I think it might be a good idea for us to differentiate, right? Discriminate between discipline and rigidity. Rigidity doesn't leave room for anything. Discipline does. Discipline leaves room for you to, look, I want to exercise today, but do I have to? Is it a should, or do I want to exercise today? If I'm disciplined, I will make the time, but I will also be flexible. If I'm injured, it might not be a good idea to do that today. But if I'm rigid, I'll keep exercising and exacerbate my injury. See, that's the difference here. So discipline has room for our life, room for us to be ourselves, room for us to respond appropriately to whatever is happening in our life. Rigidity doesn't.
Respond appropriately to our life. That is well said. Yeah. No, I love making, I didn't even realize I was associating those two. And I wasn't really, because one of the, I often hear criticisms of 12 steps and, rigidity, but I think I don't think rigidity is the right word.
Structure is a better word.
Structure.
So one of the things that in California, there was the Pacific Group. You probably may have heard, right? Well, listen, that's a very highly structured, disciplined group. They have a lot of rules and concepts about how people are, need to show up in their recovery. And that structure is heaven sent for some people that have been living in chaos and cannot organize themselves. They glam onto it and they thrive and they grow and develop. So I'm all for us paying attention to what we need, right? Now, somebody that has been too rigid in their life and too structured might need the opposite. Hang loose a little bit, right? Lighten up, chill out, man. Come on, let's not take yourself too serious. So each and every one of us, as we said earlier on, we need to find our way and what works best for us. But that's the key, is paying attention to, is what I'm doing nourishing me and helping me become who I can be? Look at, we are not human beings. We are not human doings. We are humans becoming. That's the issue. We are always unfolding and continuing on this journey. We'll get to the finish line, but we won't be finished when we get to the finish line. We'll be dead when we get to the finish line. But we won't be finished with growing and evolving and integrating all of the things that we need to integrate to become what we can be.
I think that's a relief to know that I'm never going to be finished, right? And I think when you were talking about shoulds, we're both in long-term recovery, and I feel like one of the shoulds that I bump up against is I should be better than I am, or I should be in a different place. Or like when I turned 20 or sober, I thought it was going to feel so great, like some big milestone, but my overwhelming feeling was shame that I wasn't better. I wasn't better already. But trust me, I'm better. But
well, I shared with you before the show started, my own personal crisis right now and what I'm going through. And, a few weeks ago, my wife unexpectedly served me with divorce papers. And I was devastated. I still am. I could cry right now. I'm in a lot of pain about it. But the big battle is just what you said, not to fault myself in terms of who I wasn't and my contribution to us getting to that place. Because we all have our part in it, right? We learned that. And so instead of me focusing on blaming her and what she's doing, what I'm doing in my program is stepping back and saying, okay, where did I fall asleep in this marriage? How did I end up, not addressing these things? Now, there's a big should in my head. You're Dr. Berger. You should have known better, right? Well, I like the Beatles song, I should have known better, but I don't think it's a good one for us to play for ourselves, right? It shouldn't become a theme song for us, right? No, right? And so I've had that battle here, right? Just like you're talking about. And so far, thank goodness, all the support and help I'm getting and stuff like that, I'm staying focused on what can I learn from this painful experience I'm having? And that's, I think, part of the gift of recovery. No matter what happens to us, right? No matter what experience we have, and this is painful, you can understand that. I'm sure you can
Oh
put yourself
yeah,
in my shoes for a minute and know how
sure.
devastating that must be. But I also have this faith that if I keep digesting it, if I keep staying pressed up against it, and as gently as I can with myself, I'm going to become a better person as a result of this. I'm going to learn how to love better. My big insight, my contribution to this was I realized that I got to a place in the relationship where I was demanding love rather than inspiring it.
Wow.
And
Wow.
it was such, it was so important to see that, because
Yeah.
that's not who I want to be. I don't want to be that person. I want to inspire love in my partner. I want
Right.
them to feel loved, and I want them to be inspired to give their love to me, and not to demand it or complain about what I'm not getting, but to figure out how to be with someone that inspires it. I've got a lot to learn in that area. And talk about the trauma we talked about last time. Some of these things, I was just reading a wonderful book, Ernie Larson's book, Destination Joy, I think it's called. This was one of his last books. Fantastic book. But what he says is that sometimes some of these issues are like when you have an accident and there's a bone chip in your body. It takes a while for that bone chip to work its way up, if you have a broken bone, to the surface. But when it breaks through the surface, it's very painful, right? It's very painful. I realize what's happening here now with this thing is some of these bone chips from my early childhood trauma. My father died when I was 11. That was traumatic in itself. But what happened in the family afterwards, what also exacerbated that trauma,
Mhm.
because of I felt abandoned, I felt neglected, nobody was there for me. And that propelled me into this whole life of I got to take care of myself, I've got to deny my needs. I mean, I'm so much is being revealed to me right now. So anyway, that's a little piece, a little snapshot of
No,
the
thank
journey.
you so much for sharing that. I mean, I know how incredibly painful that is. And as you were talking about that, I had a really disorienting, painful experience a year and a half ago, and my mother died. And it's just completely disorienting. And over this last year and a half, I've learned many lessons. And something that came up recently was I was reminded of that idea that things aren't happening to us, they're happening for us. And I keep this, right? I keep this quote in front of me: life will bring people and circumstances to reveal where you are not free.
Wow, wonderful.
And it's like, wow, yeah. I mean, where are we not free? These are, listen, these
Well,
are
I
not
needed to
lessons
hear
we would have,
that. I needed to hear that. Thank
did
you.
you?
Thank you. Thank you.
Of course. But these are not lessons I would have signed up for,
No, please. No,
right?
no, 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 no.
Drug addiction, alcoholism, all my other isms, I wouldn't have signed up, grieving the loss of my mom, and, you going through your divorce. These are not lessons that we would have signed up for. But I think
I love
because,
the word disorienting, though. You're right. That's a big
right?
part of my experience. I feel disoriented, less now, but at the beginning, I was lost. I was
Yeah.
so lost in
Lost.
the pain.
Yeah. Yeah, because that feeling of lost is, I think, something that a lot of people can relate to at any point in your sobriety, where you're in the like, like when you're thinking about it and then you prepare. I forgot what the P's are, but I'm sure you do. It's like there's like you're thinking about it, and then you're planning and then you actually get into action, and then it doesn't matter what stage you're in. It's like we all have that. It's like our identity is changing, and it is a disorienting process. And then the questions are like, well, who am I? What do I want? How do I want to spend my time? It's like we have to make those really profound, come to those conclusions all over again.
Right. Right on. Eileen. Right on.
Super challenging. Listen, I want to just observe. I just want to give you a little bit of feedback. I have interviewed a lot of people, probably 300 people at this point, and I can always tell when someone has done their inner work because I'm just so in awe and inspired by your ability to allow your feelings to process. Like you honor, I just witnessed you honoring your feelings as they came up. The people who are like, no, 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 I don't want to talk about it, or they give me the kill signal on the video, they're like, move on, you know. I always feel a little bit sad for them. Like the pain is not really something to avoid. It's something to lean into because that's, the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear to enter type of thing. And I just wanted to just sort of mirror that back to you, that I recognize that you're a person of substance because you have done your work. And I just know that you're going to have some amazing blessings on the other side of this.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about your book, the things that people do to mess up their lives, because relapse, I've talked to a few people recently that have relapsed, and I can tell you, I fucking hate addiction. It breaks my heart. It is so painful to watch somebody you love suffer, right? And it feels like it's needless. But I guess the spiritual principles are that this pain is the touchstone of all growth and blah, blah, blah.
I,
Um,
I, I relate to the blah, blah, blah right
yeah,
now.
I'm not into it. I prefer, I ask for gentle lessons these days, right? God deliver gentle lessons. Um, I want to be led through crystal clear direction because I get easily confused. But I think it's so important I want to go over some of the things that you have identified as things that, we do to ourselves to mess up our own recovery.
May I
So
share with you some of my idea when I wrote that first book?
please, yeah.
So it my training was with a brilliant psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Walter Kempler. And Walter Kempler was a Gestalt therapist. And one of the principles of Gestalt therapy, there's so many, but it was one of the humanistic forms of psychotherapy that surfaced in the 60s. And the whole humanistic approach was very different than the psychoanalytic or psychodynamic approach before that, right? We used to say that psychoanalysis kind of colored the patient dark. Well, humanistic psychologists came on and put the light on. They illuminated people. They looked for the best in people. They looked for what was right about us, not what was wrong about us. So Maslow would talk about our peak experiences, and so would Carl Rogers and other of these brilliant men and women that heralded in this incredible movement. Well, Gestalt therapy was a very specific form of psychotherapy that developed out of that whole zeitgeist, right, out of that spirit of the times. One of the principles in Gestalt therapy is that we change. It's called the paradoxical theory of change. We change when we own what we're doing, not when we try to be someone we're not. So a great example is step one in our program in the 12 steps of AA. How is admitting you're powerless going to help you find power? That's the paradox. That as soon as I say I'm powerless, I now create a space in my consciousness to find power. As soon as I say I've made my life unmanageable, I can start learning how to live a manageable life. But I can't do that if I'm denying what is true about me. See, so the 12 stupid things that mess up recovery were written to help people own what they're doing so they can discover a new possibility. You cannot discover a new possibility until you own what's going on. What do we say? Acceptance is the prerequisite for change. I'll say that again. Acceptance is a prerequisite for change. So if I accept I'm powerless, and I can live in that existential crisis for a minute, which, it's not easy. Because if I'm powerless and I got a disease that's killing me, I'm in big trouble here, folks. I mean, 911 time, right? And when I really let myself feel that, that's okay. Because in the feeling of that, in that space, is when you're going to discover that power. Now, that's the whole idea behind all these 12 stupid things we're going to talk about. That if you can own some of these things, and look, I tell everybody, I'm a lot smarter now that I know how stupid I am. It's a weird thing. I can be I'm PhD. I think I'm a pretty bright guy, but
You
I
are.
can be incredibly stupid at times. And I'm a
Yes.
lot smarter now that I know how stupid I can be. So when I do it, I go, up, there it is again.
There it is. With compassion. Oh,
With
there it is.
compassion, it's no judgment on it. It's just accepting that, look, those ideas that I have to be someone to be okay. I'm
Yeah.
hopefully shedding some of them. Some of them are coming up now with this divorce thing for me,
Yeah.
big time. But I've done some pretty good work in terms of letting go a lot of those things.
Listen, yeah, it's beautiful and amazing. And, we both deal with people who are really struggling with resistance and seeing things as they are.
That's right.
I was watching, of all places to get a spiritual lesson, I was watching a show called Meat Eater with Steve Ranella, who's like this hunter environmentalist.
Yeah.
And he shared a concept called the shifting baseline syndrome that I need to do a little more research on. But it has haunted me ever since I heard it, because as somebody who experienced addiction and alcoholism, and, I dare say, like, experiencing grief and loss and things like that, the shifting baseline syndrome speaks to the idea of human evolution as resources became scarce, whether it was due to famine, wartime, whatever. The baseline is, we're in homeostasis, we're in a comfort zone, let's say. But if things beyond our control start lowering the quantity of our life, the baseline shifts, right? But it speaks to the idea of human adaptability to circumstances and environments. So it's this idea that, oh, things aren't that bad. Like, I can keep going, I think, is the basic premise of how we survive like famine and wartime. But in addiction, it serves to hinder us in the sense, the book talks about seeking lower companionship. And it's like, oh, or my drinking's not that bad. My relationships are not that bad. My health is not that bad. My weight's not that, you know what I'm saying? It's like the shifting baseline syndrome. And it feels like what you were talking about, the paradoxical theory of change, speaks to how do we
Yeah.
right the ship, so to speak, and raise the level of our baseline so that we can improve the quality of our everything, really.
No, that process in psychology, we talk about habituation. So if you start tapping on a person's arm and you do it for an hour, pretty soon they don't even pay attention to the fact you're tapping on their arm. They've habituated to the
That's called motherhood, by the way.
Oh, that's
Mom,
That's
mom.
That's good. The kids are habituated,
Yeah.
are giving you an experience of habituation.
Yeah.
But when we habituate, what happens with alcoholism is we make normal what is abnormal. Right? We make
Yes.
right what is wrong.
When everyone has an addiction, it looks like nobody has an addiction,
That's right.
like
That's right.
technology.
Yeah. Great.
Oh my goodness. I love all these principles. I'm like, I can just see it so clearly as soon as you say it. So the first one that you have on your list, believing addiction to one substance is the only problem.
Yeah.
How does that lead to relapse?
Well, look, from my understanding of the neuropsychology, neurobiology of addiction, is that for whatever reason, we are bodily different than other people, those of us that suffer from this disease. And now, because of neurosciences, we're able to take a look into the brain and see what's going on because of things like CAT scans, SPECS, MRIs, and things like that. And what we get, the picture we get, is we now know that the addiction changes certain structures of the brain that then involve or hijack other structures of the brain. So when that happens, is we really are hijacked by our illness. I mean, what's that old saying? A man takes a drink and then the drink takes the man. That's
Oof.
exactly what happens here.
Yeah.
And then we're off and running. So if I don't understand that, and I think that, look, all I need to do if I'm an alcoholic is not drink alcohol, but it's okay to go ahead and smoke some marijuana or whatever it is. I think you're walking on, on a razor's edge at that point in time. I think you're playing with fire. I think it's like playing Russian roulette.
Yeah.
Maybe it will work for you, maybe it won't, but why risk it? See, this is the other thing I ask. See, there's no part of me that wants to go back. It was funny. I had a trouble sleeping. I didn't sleep for 4 nights, and I was getting really, sleep is so important for us, right? I was laying there awake, tossing and turning, and I was just in my own hell. So I finally, talked to my sponsor about I need to get a rest. What do you think about me asking my doctor to give me an Ambien? And he agreed that, you need to do something here. So I took the Ambien. It put me to sleep, but it drugged me up so bad the next day. And I woke up, and the first thing I noticed, I don't like this feeling. And I
Yeah.
said, it's so different than 50 years ago. I couldn't wait to have this feeling. And now I don't like it.
Yeah.
See, that's how we get to when we're really in the program. Bill talked about it, like, if you really have a fit spiritual program, when you go to use a drug, including alcohol, you're going to react like you put your hand on a hot stove,
Right.
right? It's ouch. You're not going to do that to yourself. You see, and that's where I'm at today. If you really are in full recovery, you don't want to drink or use anymore. It's not a part of a possibility for you because of what your experience in your life is so great. Nothing, no drug is going to make this experience better for me. This experience is incredible as it is.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me think too, this believing addiction to one substance is the only problem. I think it skips over what the real problem is, which is the guilt and shame and trauma that's bubbling up underneath that compels people to drink. I always feel like the purpose of addiction is distraction, right? Like it's to provide relief from the pain and distract us from us. But I'm kind of obsessed with the idea of addressing core issues, core wounds, so that we don't feel compelled to use anything, including, sex, shopping, food, cigarettes.
How many times do we see that, right? Look, I think NA had it right when they said, we admitted we were powerless over our addiction. They didn't put one specific substance in.
Yeah.
Now, Bill said we were powerless over alcohol because at that point he was really reaching people that were alcoholic, right? And they
Right.
couldn't identify with people that were quote unquote drug addicts, right? Look,
Right.
alcohol is a drug. We know that person's
Yeah, we know that now. Yeah.
now we get that stuff. But back then, it wasn't it. And there's a reason why. I do think that people that are more into alcohol have a hard time identifying in an NA meeting, right?
Right. Yeah.
Of course, they don't have enough tattoos or something. I've never
That's
seen.
changing these days.
Oh, it is. Everybody's getting tattoos these days, man. It's becoming part of body art, right? So
It
there's
is.
very
Yeah.
beautiful.
I was 45 before I got my first tattoo, but anyway, it's not important to discuss my tattoo.
But anyway, but there was a different kind of an
Right.
experience.
Yeah.
Now it's changing. You're right. I think the composition, even early on, NA was more very hardcore heroin addicts,
Yeah, they
right?
were there's when I first got sober, like 29 years, almost 30 years ago, it was a different crowd. And I think
Different crowd.
people need to
Yep.
go where they relate. So I think that's why there's so many different 12-step programs, because
You're
people need to
exactly right.
speak the
Thank
language.
you. And then you go. But my point of this whole thing is that when your brain changes, it changes forever. There's nothing that we know today that's going to be able to repair that. I've got many clients that have gone out and tried this. They've done the research.
I know.
They
The
have that
relapse.
recommendation. I think I could do this and I'll be okay. I think I could just use this way and I'll be okay. Eventually, it doesn't mean you're going to lose control the first time you go out, but eventually that loss of control is going to show up.
Yeah.
And that's the hallmark of addiction, a
It
complete
really
loss
is.
of control.
Complete loss of control. Very good. Number 2 is believing sobriety will fix everything.
Well, that's what we're talking about, aren't we?
We
My
are.
goodness, it's an important step towards fixing everything, but
Yeah.
it's not going to fix everything. That's not to say that your life won't get a lot better if you put the plug in the jug, or if you get clean. It will. But there's these other issues that you were just talking about, right? That those bone chips that are going to work their way to the surface that we've got to address if we're going to have what I like to call optimal recovery, what Ernie Larson called full recovery. If we're going to experience that, we've got to do the work.
Yes.
We've got to, Bill says, he says, this way of life is simple, but a price must be paid. That
Yeah.
we've got to go down and we've got to start digging into these things, and we've got to start facing some of the things that are hard to face. Excuse me, I'm on that journey right now, big time. I'm looking at
Yeah.
some of this childhood trauma I had and the incredible reverberations, right? The ripple effect that this has had in so many areas of my life.
Yeah.
Very important. Very
Yeah.
important.
I have found that sobriety is just really the beginning of the path, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's still joy to be had, but I think it's so important to just, I mean, you're setting a good expectation, that life is still going to be lifey, but we will have tools on how to cope with it. And there's still joy to be had, even, if we can notice moments of peace or notice moments of contentment, there's still, there is relief. It won't all be shitty.
Oh, that's what Ernie Larson says it this way. And I love how he says it, because he talks about stage 2 recovery, which I think stage 2 recovery is contingent upon emotional sobriety. But he says this, he says that in stage 2 recovery, what we start to realize is that we have to address all of the issues that caused us problems in the first place. Those
Mhm.
habits, those patterns, right?
Beliefs.
That have caused us trouble for our whole life, that now we're clear-headed enough and on this path of growth and recovery that we can start to do something about. And so
Yeah.
we say this all the time. Trouble in recovery doesn't mean something's wrong. It
Right.
means something new is needed. It's a calling. It's your
Oh,
spirit is calling you to take the next step in your development.
that seems like such a much more compassionate, empathetic perspective. It's like life is trying to help you. Life is happening for you, not to you.
There you go. You said that earlier, right?
Yeah,
It's
and what you've
happening for you, not to you.
yeah, and what you've said a few times already is about taking action, right? It's so often like we're waiting to feel good before we take action, but the truth is that mood follows action. Right, it's the other way around, and that's been the case in my sobriety where I always think it's the opposite. It's not, I'll believe it when I see it. It's like I'll see it when I believe it, type of
Right.
thing. Yeah. Number 3 is pursuing recovery with less energy than pursuing addiction, and that kind of speaks to the action part, right?
Oh, boy, listen, I don't, I've never seen an addict or an alcoholic use half measures in their addiction.
Yeah,
I would go to
half
any
measure.
lengths. I would go to any lengths to get high, any
Yeah.
length, no matter what I had
Yes.
to do. And
Uh-huh.
now, if I'm willing to apply that same commitment to my recovery, I've got a good chance of creating a remarkable life. But if I come in and I'm half-assed about this, it's not going to work. It's just not.
Half measures avail us nothing.
Half measures avail us nothing. And
That's
so
so
we
funny.
think
We're
it, and check out, are you willing to go to any lengths today in your recovery? If you're willing to go to any lengths, you've got a good solid foundation for the rest of your life.
willingness to go to any lengths. That's true. I think about some of the seeking lower companionship or putting, I was young when I got sober. So before I got sober, I was young and putting myself in really dangerous situations. And now I'm asked to get a little bit uncomfortable. Oh, make a few phone calls. I have my girls do willingness calls. Oh, meditate. I mean, for heaven's sakes, meditation is like where I can go to get relief. I don't know why I resist it so much. The only thing I do in half measures now is my recovery. That's my only moderation. It's ridiculous. But isn't it amazing how just a little bit of action can bring relief so quickly?
That's the other cool thing about this. An ounce of action can give you gallons of relief, right?
I
Gallons.
love that. Gallons.
It's that thing. It's not proportionate.
It isn't. Yeah.
Little changes can have significant impact on your life.
Yeah. I remember dealing with this one gal who had relapsed, and she was in so much emotional pain, and it all feels so real. And, 30 days later, man, she just took some action. She went to the meeting, she did the, service, she did all the things. And she's like a different person in 30 days. Amazing. I love that. Number 4, being selectively honest.
Well, and look,
Ooh,
it's
that's a good one.
what's the saying in the rooms? You're as sick as you are secretive, right? You're as
Uh-huh.
sick as you are secretive.
Why is that?
Well, it's you see, what keeps us from sharing things is our shame. Is
Shame.
the idea that I should be something other than I am. And this is the problem. It's that when I can be completely open and honest with you, I'm free. If I'm unable to share certain things, it means that I am coming up against this idea that I should be somebody other than I am.
Right.
And that's what creates shame. It's measuring yourself to an ideal,
Ooh.
right? It's feeling like I have failed. I am not who I am supposed to be. So it's not that I just made a mistake. I am a mistake. See, that's what shame tells us. And it's a horrible emotion. A lot of people suicide when they feel that they've done something so shameful that they cannot face anyone. It's that losing face, right? That's the shame part of it. I've lost face. So what we know is that the more willing you are to reveal yourself, and look, it's back to this thing about being vulnerable. And what I say is don't expect yourself to go from I don't want to share this to share it. Start out by saying there's something in me that I'm having a hard time sharing. If you can own that and start to talk about what's making it difficult to share, then you're going to be able to support yourself to share it. So none of this stuff is to go from here to there. We have to support ourselves to be able to be honest. Bill Wilson said it clearly in the big book, more will be revealed. Now I'm at 51 years into my journey in recovery. I am more honest with myself today, and I'm able to talk about things that I could not talk about 50 years ago. A lot of them are very similar to what's going on today, because a lot of these are some of these childhood trauma issues I've had. But it took me when I came back from, listen to this. I was in Vietnam in 1970 to 71. I'm a combat Vietnam vet. I was in the Marine Corps. Took me 20 years almost to talk about my combat experience in Vietnam. 20
Wow.
years because of the trauma.
Wow, I've heard that. I've heard that before.
It's
Like
very common.
the vets
Yeah,
that are coming back now from like Iraq and
yeah, that's right. In
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, that's right.
Yeah.
They're not talking about it. And the first thing we do in terms of treating PTSD is to create an environment encouraging people to start sharing the things that they just are having trouble sharing.
Right.
It's amazing. I just completed an evaluation by the Veterans Administration to see if I'm disabled from my experience in Vietnam, and I came back 80% disabled.
80%.
I was blown away that I was exposed to Agent Orange. So on a physical basis, I have some disabilities from that exposure. And I came back with suffering from a very high degree of post-traumatic stress.
Yeah. It's amazing how you've been able to be so functional.
Yes. Well, it says that I've done some work, right?
You've done
Obviously,
a lot of work. Yeah.
I've done a lot of work in my life. The 12-step program has been amazing. I've done a lot of psychotherapy, been to a lot of personal growth experiences. So I do put in the time.
You do. Yeah.
One of the things that's helping me with this pain I'm in now, I had a 3-hour EMDR session the other day.
3 hours?
Yes, a 3 hour, Dr. Berger, a good friend of mine. She knew how much trouble I've been in terms of my crisis. She was so generous. I love her. So I'm putting a shout out to her. She's amazing.
Mhm.
She came to the hotel I was staying at. She spent 3 hours with me and did 3 sessions and then processed them at the end. I can't tell you how much relief I've experienced since then. It really, and I've been doing a lot of other work as well, and a lot of other people are helping me, but that right now, I could put my finger on is that shifted something inside me emotionally, big time. So I'm doing the work. I'm committed.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, EMDR is hard. I've done EMDR. I did a period of time when I did several sessions, and that is really deep, intensive trauma work. It does change you for sure.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. So number 5, feeling special and unique. I can't tell you how many times I talk to people where they're like, I'm not like them, or I'm an artist, I'm a professional athlete. My childhood was so screwed up. Nobody's gonna like, I'm different. That's a big one. How do people overcome that?
Well, you got to claim it, right? You got to name it to tame it. I say you got to name it,
Name it
tame
to
it,
tame it.
name it to tame it, because look, that's going to kill you, right?
Yeah,
How many people say, "Well, I'm not like those other people in that meeting. They have
yeah.
problems. I don't have any problems.
I'm not like those people.
I'm not as sick as those people."
Yeah.
Oh, listen to all their problems, right? Yeah, but see, it's this what we call. I like to think of it as we claim special status as a way of trying to have self-esteem, but it's pseudo self-esteem. You don't get
Pseudo.
self-esteem by saying you're better than people.
Right.
You get self-esteem by having a different relationship with yourself. If you think of self-esteem is the evaluation you have of yourself, the reputation you have with yourself. Self-esteem is an utter refusal to be in an adversarial relationship with yourself. That's what self-esteem is about. So claiming you're better than other people does not increase your self-esteem. In fact, it really subtracts from it, right? It really subtracts to it because now you're not able to own who you really are and to be able to accept yourself as you are. Self-acceptance is such a cornerstone to self-esteem. So this idea that I'm different than these folks, I'm not as sick as they are. They're trying to buoy themselves and have some self-esteem, but it's pseudo self-esteem. And you and I know that as soon as I surrender, right? As soon as I accept some of these things, admit these things, that's the path to freedom. Not trying to be better than other people, not trying to say I'm different. And you know where that takes people. I've seen it. They go out and say, no, I'm not one of them. And they go out and they now try to drink or use again. And what happens? They're right back in the thing. Only things are worse this time. So you're
Yeah.
right. It's not a path. That's not a path to people getting well.
Yeah. The whole special, I think the underlying message is that I'm separate. And, they say that addiction is a disease of isolation and connection is the cure, right? And so this idea of I'm special or I'm unique, I think is an excuse. I actually think it's born from the need to stay safe, right? Like I get that it's like if we look at this from through a compassionate lens, it's a survival skill that is no longer functional. It's no longer useful.
And like earlier on, what we did with when we were talking about discipline versus rigidity, I think that in this area, we are unique. There is not going to be another you that's ever going to be showing
Yeah.
up in the world. I
Yeah.
mean, that's important for us to acknowledge.
Yeah.
My parents came together, and their whole history, their seeds led them
Right.
to who they are. They created me. There will never be another Allen Berger in this world. There will never be another you in this world. And that's what we can enjoy that. That's
Yeah.
okay.
That's
But that
okay.
doesn't mean I'm special. That means I'm unique.
Yeah.
See, I want to separate that out.
I
is
like
being
that.
unique is wonderful. We can enjoy ourselves. I love your uniqueness. I love who you are. You're fun to be with. You have one of the most beautiful smiles I've ever seen in my life. I mean,
Oh,
things like that. And that's unique to you,
yeah.
right? And how you show up. But you're not special in that you somehow the laws of gravity don't apply to you. I tell people, you think you're really special, don't you? Yeah, I am. I am special. All right, so go ahead. Because you're special, go stand on the top of this roof and jump off. Because regardless of what you think you are, gravity is going to take you to the ground and you break a bunch of bones, dummy.
All
See,
right.
being special means that somehow all these laws of
Don't apply to you.
nature,
Yeah.
psychology, it don't apply to us. Sorry.
And now
You're human first. You're
you're,
you're a
yeah.
unique human being, but you're not. You all this other stuff applies to you. You
Yeah.
don't. You're gonna starve.
Yeah. We need to see these things through with the
We
correct
gotta put the
context
right
and
lens
perspective.
on, right? We gotta put the right lens on.
Got to put the right lens on. Number 6 is not making amends. Ooh, that's a big one.
Uh, my good friend Herb Kagan has a workshop he does every year. He starts out, he's in Southern California, he takes people through the 12 steps, kind of a very evolved version of what Joe and Charlie did. And he starts out with about 200 people, gets to step 4. These are people committed to recovery, loses half of them,
Yeah.
gets to step 8, another 50% disappear.
Not step 9.
And well, 8 and 9 together, right?
8, 9 together. Yeah.
8 and 9.
I
I
do
mean,
I do a 12-step workshop for free, every year. And I lose about half or most at step 4, and then another big chunk at step 9. We went from like 25 or 30 people on day 1 to about there. I think actually I was really impressed that there were about 9 people by the end.
they finished. Yeah, look at
Yeah.
that. That's wonderful. That's a good
Six or
number.
9. Yeah. So, but
But
yeah,
look, it's
that's
hard.
rough.
This is what Bill was saying. A price must be paid. It's
Yeah.
not easy to look at these things. It's not easy to take responsibility,
Wow.
especially if responsibility is fused with blame. You see, if I blame myself, then when I take responsibility, all I can do is feel bad about myself.
Shame. Yeah.
Yeah, it brings up shame, but responsibility in its purest form is empowering. It doesn't diminish you. But this is the thing. That's why the steps are numbered in sequence. Because if you do the work, by the time you get to step 8, you're able to support yourself enough to take responsibility and not implode with it, but to integrate with it. See, step 8 and 9 are integration steps. They're steps that are helping us take. And the way I think of steps 6 and 7, those are our pivot steps. We pivot towards the best possible attitude, first towards our problems, our shortcomings, next towards our relationship with others, and then finally in steps 10, 11, and 12, towards our relationship with life. So it's always shifting to what's my best possible attitude? What's the best way to show up here? How can I bring the best of me to this situation? How can I learn to be the best possible person I can be in my relationships with others? Well, taking responsibility, right? I've made some mistakes in my marriage. Right now, the way I'm showing up in this divorce is I'm going to take responsibility and I'm going to have the best possible attitude with the most love I can bring to this divorce, and to make sure that this happens in the best way, and to support my ex-wife in whatever ways I can, and to give her everything that I want to give her now that I'm awake, right? Now that I'm awake, I can see what I need to do. That's what we're doing here in the program. And that's why not making amends, you're really depriving yourself of such a gift.
Yeah. And taking responsibility also means taking your power back.
That's it.
Right. To me, it's like taking your power back and then letting go of that resentment. It's that, what is that saying about the poison, like drinking poison, expecting somebody else to die?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's exactly it, right? I drink
Man, that
poison. I'm
resentment.
mad at you. I'm going to get at you, so I'll drink some poison. Well, Who's that killing, right? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I maybe a better analogy or that saying of resentment is like acid that destroys the vase that holds it.
yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so let that shit go.
Yeah.
Let it go. Let's see. So using the program to try to become air quotes
Yeah.
perfect.
Uh, we all want to be perfect. We started that off very early in life. It's just it's part of our wiring to move towards completion. But when we take it as the way that my mentor, Dr. Kempler, said, he says there's nothing wrong with striving for perfection. We would say progress in the program. That's what he meant. He says, as long as you never fool yourself into thinking you can achieve it. See,
Yeah, yeah,
that's the point in time. Just don't buy into that somehow you can pull that off. You can't. You can't.
right.
And see, that's the thing. And when people hold themselves to that standard, all they can do is feel bad about themselves.
Yeah, it just turns into another thing we beat ourselves up
Well,
over.
that's right. We should on ourselves, right?
We should on ourselves.
All,
Yeah.
all these shit, man.
Yeah, I don't like those. Number 8, I'm trying to get through the rest of these.
I know you are. And I'm aware of the time too. You're
I
doing
know
a
you have
great
a
job. I'll try to be more brief.
no, you're good. Let's see. 8 is confusing self-concern with selfishness. That's a big one. People are like, oh, I'm self. There's a kind of like the mixed message. It's like, oh, we're self-centered to the extreme. And then, but oh, by the way, you have to do all this self-examination. It can be kind of confusing.
Well, it is. You know, what we try to say, you got to get rid of yourself. You know, you're too self-centered and stuff. And people take this to mean, well, where do I show up? Well, the program is still about you taking care of yourself in a good way.
Right.
You know, where not, you know, it's not just about the I, but it's about the we. And that's
Right.
a healthy self, right? That's what we're really encouraging people to do, is to develop a healthy self,
Yeah.
not the ego-centered, the ego-driven, selfish self-centeredness that we had before, or the protective I, as some people like to call it, from a compassionate point of view, but to develop the healthy I that has room for me and you, right? That's that. So if I pay attention to myself, there's two parts of me. The part of me that I'm interested in being my own person and being an individual, but I'm also interested in a relationship with you.
Right.
So I have a we in me and I have an I in me. And a healthy person is able to balance the I and the we. See, I define mental health just real quickly as an appropriate balance and coordination of all of what we are. An appropriate balance and coordination of all. I have a desire to honor myself, but I also have a desire to be of value to you. I have to find a way to balance those out.
That's a big one. I think a lot of us kind of take the step 12 a little too far, carrying the message where we want to save everybody.
Yeah.
But we have
That's
to balance that out with saving ourselves.
Yeah.
That's good. Number 9 is playing futile self-improvement games. What's a futile self-improvement game?
Well, when you beat yourself up, when you put yourself down and say, I'm such an idiot. My God, how could I do that? You dummy. And then and that's the top dog. The underdog says, you're right. I'm stupid. I'll never be ever. Yes, you are. And it goes nowhere. You don't improve yourself by beating yourself up. You improve yourself by taking responsibility for what's going on, being authentic about what your experience is, owning it, and then being open to learning from it. That's how we go. You don't change by another futile self-improvement game is trying to be perfect.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right? That's another one. Trying to work a perfect program.
Perfectionism. Yeah.
Perfectionism.
Alcoholism.
Or, another futile self-improvement game is that pseudo self-esteem that comes from I'm special.
Oh,
That's another futile self-improvement. You're not going to get self-esteem by trying to focus on how much better you are than everybody else.
yeah. And I really identify with the trying to rescue people.
That's another futile.
Like, I need you to be okay. I need to rescue you so that I can feel okay. Like,
yeah.
That's that does not get me very far.
No.
10, not getting help for relationship troubles. Like, we need to seek some professional help at some point.
Oh, we do. Look, I'm right in that place right now, and I didn't even realize I was so asleep in terms of what was going on for me, partly because this is related to some of my childhood trauma.
Yeah.
So we need to do it. I've sought a couples therapist, even though we're getting divorced, we're in couples therapy right now. It's increased a lot of my sessions with my individual therapist. I did some EMDR. I'm out here spending a week with my sponsor, Tom, in Hawaii.
Yeah.
You get, grounded again so that I can go back and face with whatever is next in my life here. It's a big next, right? To be able to face all these changes at this point. It's a lot, my life is really turning upside down. So now I've got to really rely on getting connected to myself to be able to take on this challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. 11 is believing that life should be easy.
Oh boy. Oh, that'll kill us. Look,
Yeah. It's like we think that we could work hard and then at some point, then we can take the foot off the gas and just
kind of cruise,
coast.
right? Yeah. Go
Yeah.
on, set it on cruise control. I think
Yeah.
I did that in terms of my relationship, and I'm paying a terrible price for it. Life is not easy. Life is difficult, and it's okay to accept that. Scott Peck, the first words in his book, his first sentence is life is difficult. That's how he started out his book, The Road Less Traveled. He says life is difficult, but we all want it to be easy.
Yeah.
We are obsessed with easy in our culture.
We are.
We're obsessed with finding the easier, softer way.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with doing that sometimes and looking for something that's economical and doing it better, but not as a philosophy of life.
Yeah.
Like somebody said to me the other day, and I think it was Herman Hesse that quoted this, we have to imagine Sisyphus pushing that rock up the mountain with a smile on his face.
I never thought of that. The smile,
With
a
a
smile on
smile
it.
on his face, that he's pushing it up and he's
Yeah.
enjoying the every moment of the journey.
Was he? I haven't read Sisyphus. I
I
mean, I know
don't
he
know.
pushed.
I probably not, but we can imagine it.
We
I
can
mean,
imagine it. Yeah. There's no limits on that.
we've got to put the smile on our face. I think that's the bottom line.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Yeah. Life. Do you know that book by M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, was the book that got me into sobriety?
Look at that.
Yeah. And you mentioned it a couple times. I always ask people what was the book that helped them early on in recovery, and mine's always M. Scott Peck's. That was the first time I was introduced to the idea that there's a 50-50 shared responsibility in any relationship. I don't know why that was so shocking to me at the time, but it really was. I think that helped me deal with resentment and blame.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 12, we made it to number 12, using the program to handle everything. What does that mean?
Well, it's look, the 12 steps are an incredible technology and they're great, but it doesn't mean that like EMDR can't be useful for me,
Right.
right? It can. And sometimes some people need medication. If somebody's severely depressed and they can't get to a meeting, then going on an antidepressant may be a good thing. To tell someone, you can solve all your problems if you work the better program, I think is the wrong message.
Yeah, it's very
Program,
invalidating.
yeah, our program is great. It gives us a great foundation, but psychotherapy has been a part of my recovery, my whole recovery. In the 1 years I've been on this journey, probably 20 of them I've been in therapy.
Yeah.
And it's been very helpful. I did EMDR the other day. There's been a few times when I've had to take, a small piece of Xanax to deal with some overwhelming anxiety that I couldn't cope with.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to use these other things. We just have to use them where they're integrated into our program.
Right.
They're not to replace our program, they're to enhance it. And that's what I tell people. Any of these things can be enriching and enhancing to your program if you approach them the right way.
Yeah. And I also want to, it just reminds me, since you brought up medications, that I recently had a debate with somebody, as we do, about what AA says and what they don't say or what they think. I'm writing a whole book about it, but one is specifically around medications. And I thought, what does AA say about it? So I literally went to aa.org, and there is a pamphlet that you can download on PDF about medications.
Yeah.
And the TLDR version is they don't have an opinion. It's between you and your doctor and your sponsor and between you and God. AA doesn't even have an opinion. They get in the pamphlet, gives examples of people who didn't use their medication and had disastrous results, and people that did use medication and also had disastrous results. Like you can spin out sideways on either side of this debate.
Yeah, right on. Well, listen, it was great enjoy spending this time with you again. Always.
Thank you so much. I'm
always-
so grateful we got through all 12. My heart goes out to you. I'll be thinking about you during this difficult time, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks for
Have a
having me.
great day. Okay, bye-bye.